A while ago, I did this video where I speedran Half-Life 2 Lost Coast in Day of Defeat Source. The beginning of it was mostly just running up the cliffside, and I noticed I don't actually know the best way to sprint in DODs. There are a lot of factors that go into it, but before we look at that, let's look at the best way to sprint in Half-Life 2, as it's much more straightforward. If the sprint button is being used and the player is moving horizontally, 12.5% of the suit's power is drained per second. If the flashlight or oxygen is being used at the same time, they have their own draining rates which will stack up, but we won't worry about that. The sprinting speed is 320 units per second. Hopefully you've seen my video about ticks, because you do need to know what a time step is to understand the math of how draining works. The amount of power lost every tick is 12.5 times the time step, which comes out to 0.1875 per tick. This is obvious, but once the power becomes negative, it's set back to 0 and we stop sprinting. When no suit functions are in use, either by voluntarily turning them off or running out of power and being above water, we can start recharging. We go back to the regular running speed of 190. Before recharging begins, an extra bit of the suit's power is drained. If the suit has been fully drained, this won't change anything, but in the case that the sprint button was voluntarily let up, this drains 1/10 of a second's worth of power, so 1.25%. Once all the suit functions are off, there's a half-second delay before recharging starts. The recharge rate is 12.5% per second, which just happens to match the sprinting drain rate. Again, it probably goes without saying, but if the suit's power goes above 100%, it goes back to 100 and stops charging. So to summarize that, the time it takes to drain a given percentage is x over 12.5. If the button is released before the power reaches 0%, an extra 1.25% is drained. The time it takes to recharge a given percentage is the same formula, but with an extra 0.5 second delay before the recharging begins. The recharge delay will apply in all cases, but when you're letting go of the button before hitting 0% rather than fully draining the power, you lose an extra bit of power. That lost power did nothing for you, but you'll have to recharge it anyway. The answer is pretty clear then. The best way to sprint in HL2 is to fully deplete your power upon every use of the sprint button and to let it fully recharge between uses so that the 0.5 second delay takes up the least amount of time per sprinting cycle. That's the intuitive answer, but let's get some mathematical proof. To find how far we move during a part of the cycle, we multiply its duration by whatever our speed will be for that part of the cycle. Finally, to get the average speed, we divide that by the time. To do this for every part of the cycle, we add the top and bottom parts together like so. I'm sorry if this was a bit too middle school, but I didn't want to just be like, yeah, I did some math, trust me bro. Anyway, one graphing calculator later, we have a graph of every sprinting cycle. X is how much of the suit's power we deplete when sprinting, and Y is the average speed. The highest possible value is 253, which necessitates draining the entire power supply every cycle. Notice at 98.75%, the speed starts increasing at a faster rate. That's because the 1.25% penalty can only take you down to 0%, which means if you manage to time your release of the sprint button just right, the penalty won't matter as much. Still, it's best if you put the entire 1.25% to actual use. Most people would consider this question answered, but there's one more thing to think about: jumping. When you jump forward or backward, you get a small speed boost, and for the entire time you're in the air, you'll maintain your speed without needing to do anything. We'll assume our input timing is perfect because, what else am I gonna do? We'll also assume we're traveling on flat ground. Jumping lets us raise our running speed to 285 and sprinting speed to 352. We can stay in the air for something like 0.53 seconds without crouching and 0.7 with crouching. Long story short, on crouching, it's not great and won't be necessary. Also, we'll need to actually press the sprint button for each jump. Jumping while only holding forward will always put us back to 285. If we sprint for one tick, we'll lose 1.4375% of our power because of the penalty, and it will take us 0.615 seconds to recharge because of the delay, which is longer than we can spend jumping. This means after 70 jumps, we'll run out of power. That will carry you across 13,000 units. Good enough, I think. With that bullet dodged, time to move on to Day of Defeat Source. First of all, DOD's version of suit power is stamina. It's mostly the same concept, but not quite. When using the sprint button and moving at more than 100 units per second horizontally, stamina is drained at a rate of 20% per second. You can see your stamina as a number by using this console variable. An interesting quirk of sprinting in DODs is that you're only meant to sprint forward, but if you hold forward, backward, and one of the strafe keys, you can sprint sideways. My keyboard doesn't like it when I hold that many buttons at once, but there are binds you can use to hold an input indefinitely. Here's where it gets tricky. The sprinting speed is 320 and the running speed is 220, but those are only the maximum speeds. The actual final speed is whichever of those two numbers is appropriate minus 100 plus the stamina as a raw number. Depending on your stamina, you could be missing up to 100 units per second of speed. To find our average speed when accelerating linearly, we can take the speed we'll start at, add on the speed we'll end at, and divide it by 2. There is also a stamina penalty of 15% applied at the start of a sprint. It's important to say this only applies the first time you're moving while holding down the sprint button. If you simply keep holding the button down, it won't reapply, even if you crouch. The recovery speed is also more complicated. To recover stamina, you must either not be holding sprint and forward, or you must be moving horizontally below 100 units per second. When not moving horizontally, stamina recovers at 60% per second. If you are moving horizontally, stamina recovers at only 10% per second unless you're fully ducked, in which case you recover at 50% per second. Ducking may be important, so let's look at the math involving it. Ducking takes whatever the player's speed would otherwise be and divides it by 3. The speed nerf applies in addition to when you're fully ducked, during both the standing to ducking phase and the ducking to standing phase. The standing to ducking phase lasts for 0.4 seconds and the ducking to standing phase lasts 0.2 seconds. When fully ducked and during the standing to ducking phase, the player's speed is programmed in such a way that ignores the sprint button, meaning our speed will be 73.3 repeating. The ducking to standing phase, while the speed nerf does still apply, will acknowledge the sprint button, enabling movement at 106.6 repeating. From what I can see, it seems like this speed is constant. If you let go of the duck button before you fully duck, you'll skip straight back to standing. With all of that considered, here's what I found. If we stop in place to recover stamina, the technically optimal movement is to sprint for 3 ticks and stop for 1 tick. Sprinting for short periods is better because the more stamina we lose, the slower sprinting becomes. This isn't actually possible, however, due to friction, acceleration, and inertia. Instead of figuring out how to factor them into my equations, I just fiddled with some scripts in-game. When stopping in place, the recovery rate is triple the draining rate, so theoretically we should get the best speed by stopping for 1/3 of the time we sprint. We can also do something called counter-strafing to stop moving sooner. Of all the timings I tried, the best one had an average speed of only 220. I do not know how that happened. For crouch walking during recovery, it was clearly terrible. The theoretical best way to move when you plan to continue running while recovering was only 5 units faster than just running. So I guess what we've learned here is don't sprint until you're close to your destination.